Let me tell you a story you probably wouldn't believe if you didn't hear it straight from the source. Yeah, this one's wild, even by my standards. I mean, imagine being hunted down years later by someone who was once just a face in your daily routine, but who ended up turning your entire world inside out. That's what happened to Sydney Walker, and trust me, it's a ride. I still remember the way he said, I need you to find Sydney Walker. She was a maid at my mom's house, and I need a full background check. Find out where she's living now. The guy was all business, but there was something in his eyes, something you only see when a man's got unfinished business with his own heart. From the very moment Hunter laid out that plan, it was clear wasn't just chasing old ghosts. He was going after something he'd lost, or maybe something he never really understood. But before we get too far ahead, let's rewind to the first time Sydney crossed paths with the Doria family. You know, the kind of folks whose house smells like fresh coffee and expensive leather. The kind who've got drivers, housekeepers, and rules that feel like invisible chains. Sydney was just doing her thing, sweeping up the living room, blending in the background, a soft smile on her lips like always. It was the kind of job that didn't pay much, but at least the kids were friendly and Mrs. Doria, for all her sternness, treated Sydney almost like family almost. That morning, Sydney got called up to the master bedroom to bring breakfast. The air was thick with the scent of scrambled eggs and warm toast, and Mrs. Doria, resting against the plush headboard, motioned for Sydney to sit at the edge of the bed. Out of all the maids, you're my favorite, she said, her voice low, almost a secret. I need you to pick up my son from the airport. Ben, the driver, will go with you. Now, Sydney had never met Hunter before she only knew his name. And let's just say the anticipation wasn't exactly excitement. She was nervous, worried she'd mess up the one thing she was trusted with. But as soon as Hunter appeared in the crowded tall, fair-skinned guy, so striking it almost hurt to look at him, Sydney's breath caught. He's so handsome, she whispered, not realizing Ben heard every word. Hunter, though, didn't waste time being charming. He shot her a look that could freeze a river and muttered, "Next time someone picks me up, don't send a cleaning lady." Yeah, that happened. If it weren't for Ben's quick reassurance, Sydney might have burst into tears right then and there. Back at the house, the family gathered around the table for lunch, but Sydney just hovered, stomach growling, trying not to be noticed. When Hunter heard her, he actually pulled out a chair. "Instead of letting your stomach do the talking, sit down and eat something," he said, patting the seat next to him. Just like that. She was part of the family at least for a moment. It shocked her how quickly things could shift. But that was Hunter. 1 minute cold, the next unexpectedly kind, as if he was always fighting some war inside himself. Maybe that's why Sydney started to feel something she couldn't quite name, even as she told herself it was ridiculous. The next day, things got even weirder. Hunter asked if Sydney could drive him somewhere. The truth? She'd never driven a car in her life. But she tried, sweating bullets, nearly sending them both to the afterlife before Hunter figured it out. "Were you planning to crash the car and kill me?" he snapped. But instead of blowing up, he switched seats and let her ride up front, not as a driver, but as something closer. And that, right there, was the beginning of the shift. They went out to a beautiful island, just the two of them. The world seemed to shrink down to a single boat right across a lake, with Sydney teasing Hunter, calling him Boss Grumpy while he rode. There was laughter, real laughter, the kind that loosens your chest and makes the future seem possible again. They talked about her life, her struggles, his time in the States, the big divide between rich and poor that always seemed impossible to cross. But all that innocence ended when a storm broke. They were stranded, soaking wet, and Hunter, despite his gruff exterior, wrapped Sydney in his arms to keep her warm. One thing led to another. You know what I mean? For Sydney, it was everything: her first love, her only love. For Hunter, it was something he couldn't explain and maybe didn't want to. But when the storm cleared, reality returned, sharp and cold. Hunter, packing to go back overseas, apologized, told Sydney not to tell anyone, and hoped she wouldn't get pregnant. "I'm not ready to be a dad," he said, and with those words, Sydney's heart shattered. She left the mansion, disappeared. For years, no one knew what happened to her. Fast forward 7 years, Hunter's life looked perfect on the outside, but something was missing. When he finally tracked Sydney down in North Carolina, what he found knocked the air out of him. She was running a tiny shop, raising 3 little girls on her own triplets, each the spitting image of him. But here's the twist: you didn't see this coming, did you? Hunter didn't just march up and claim his family. No, he disguised himself as Harry, a struggling vendor, and spent days getting close to Sydney and the kids, learning their routines, seeing how much love Sydney had poured into their lives. The kids took to him instantly, calling him Daddy without knowing the truth. And Sydney, well, her heart softened too, not realizing she was falling in love with the same man all over again. Their days were filled with simple joys: outdoor baths by the pump, shared meals, laughter echoing through the house. It was messy, loud, imperfect, but more real than anything Hunter had known. Watching those girls, Hunter realized this was what he'd always wanted: family, connection, forgiveness. But secrets have a way of catching up. One night, after Sydney confided her whole story, her pain, her love, her regrets, Hunter couldn't take it anymore. He revealed the truth. He was Harry, he was the father, and he wanted to be there for her and the girls, not as a visitor, but as family. The reunion was electric, full of tears, apologies, and the kind of forgiveness that comes only when you've been through hell and made it out the other side. Sydney let herself love him again. Hunter promised never to run, never to hurt her or the girls again. They got married on a sun-drenched beach in Charleston, the triplets running barefoot in the sand, laughter rising over the waves. Even Hunter's mother came around, finally welcoming Sydney not as a maid, but as her daughter-in-law. And just like that, Sydney's story flipped from tragedy to redemption. She was no longer just the maid. She was a wife, a mother, a woman whose love survived storms literal and figurative. But here's the kicker, the bit that'll keep people talking. If you were in Sydney's shoes, would you forgive? Would you take it back? Or would the past always be a wall too high to climb? You know what? I want to hear your take. Where does justice lie? Is love really enough to wipe out old wounds? Drop your thoughts below. Let's see where you stand.